Welcome back, everybody. We are in the process of updating our student section so that we can not only find a student, but we can search for them and we can view them and edit them. And so, one of the things, just to give you a little bit of history, this form that we made to do this student entry was made by the form builder. You know that, you did that. But the form builder was something that I wrote on an airplane. I don't remember if I was coming back from Africa or Europe or Asia, I don't know, somewhere. And I challenged myself to see if I could write this feature on an airplane without internet access, which meant that I couldn't Google anything. If there was a problem, I had to solve it from my head. And so I don't really know what options we have here. I don't use the form builder a lot myself. So if we take a look here and we go to, what is it? It'd be Form Manager, probably under Advanced Features. If we scroll down, let's see. I just started scrolling, don't even know what I'm looking at. So if I scroll down, I see this updating instead of inserting. So I had a pretty good idea. I had built a feature to do this. So if we copy this code and we come back over here, at this point we're just dumping the student and getting their information. So let's space this out a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to comment this out. We'll leave this here in case we need it for something else. But we'll paste all this stuff here. Now, this is sort of a little magic variable I made. I recognize this. And so what happens is this tells it which row in the database I need to update. And so we already know that we're grabbing this ID as the row of the database. So what we can do is we can come over here and we can make this ID, and then over here we can make this ID. Now what we need to do is we need to tell it the name of the form, and so the name of the form that we used was students. So I think we need a little bracket there. So if I refresh the page, okay, so we have a form and we have the information pre-filled out. So it should work that if I change this to 4, you know, okay, now I've got Kim Hoover. So it's doing what it needs to do in terms of pre-populating this information. Now, there's a few thoughts. Basically, I don't think it's a good idea to, if somebody gives you $20 to add to their account, that you just sit here and manually add this. I think that it wouldn't give us a very good log of what happened, and we'll it's just a bad idea. We need a different way to manipulate the balance. So we don't want to be messing with balance here. But what we do, and we also want to make sure that if we change the RFID badge, that we're doing those same checks that we did back somewhere else in the code, where we were making sure that we didn't duplicate an RFID badge that was already in the system. So let's start with the first problem, and that is getting rid of the balance. And so what we want to do is we want to come in here and we want to put a comma, and then we want to write skip, I believe. Skip is this, and we want to put this as an array, and we want to say, we basically want to take the column name of this. And so when we display a form in UserSpice, we have the ability to say, I don't want to show this particular entry, this particular column. So we're going to say, it doesn't really matter, single or double quotes. We're going to say balance. Okay, so we want to skip the balance, and let's see if that works. All right, great. So we were able to skip the balance. So we're at a pretty good place right now. We are able to basically display the form with the right information on it, but what we're not doing is actually accepting the form. And so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to do the process form thing. So let's think about this. Where did we originally use the RFID thing to update this information? So we did it when we were actually creating the student. So if we look at this chunk of code, what we were doing here is we were saying, before you process the form, then go in here and check to see if this RFID is already used, and if so, process the form. If not, then then redirect. And so let's just copy this chunk of code over here, and we're gonna walk this through, because I think we're gonna need to do something different. We'll leave that there. We're gonna need to do something different for this particular instance. So I think this deserves to go full screen. Okay, so we have this if not empty post, check the RFID, and now what we're going to do is we're going to query the database, and we're going to ask it to see, is this RFID tag already in use? Now, the first problem that comes to mind is that if you are just updating the form and you're not changing the RFID, then you will be in there. So in other words, if I have a badge and all I'm doing is updating my name, not my badge, then my badge will already be in there because it's my badge. So what we need to do is say and ID not equal question mark, and then we're going to pass that same ID in here. So this is the first time we've done this, where basically we put multiple things in here. So if you have, maybe we did it one other time, but if you have two question marks, the first variable is tied to the first question mark, and the second is tied to the second. So we're gonna take a look at that. So if we walk through this one more time, let's just check what we have going on here. So we're checking in the database to go to all the students and see if the RFID badge that we scanned is in the database. And we want to ignore, basically, if it is not our own ID. So in other words, does anybody else have this ID or this RFID badge in the thing? If not, then go ahead and process the form, and then we can ignore this. We can get rid of all the stuff about logging the well, what we can do is we can say that let's do one here called info, so that we're going to make a new log type called info, and then we're going to say modified info of student ID. So we can get rid of all this stuff here. But basically, so what we're going to do is we're going to check, make sure this isn't already in use. We're going to process the form. We're going to log the fact that we modified the info of the student who did it, and then we are going to let's say if everything's good, then let's redirect to students.php. And I think that'll do it. Again, I'm kind of writing this off the top of my head, so I think that'll do it. I think we can snap this to the right and bring this back up. And so let's refresh the page. Let's get our latest code there. And then let's just try putting Kim2 Hoover2 and update. Now if we do Hoover, okay, that did not work. So we'll figure out what we did wrong. Okay, so we have several things going on here. So the first thing that we need to take a look at is the fact that PHP will view this page from the top down, which means that when we're setting this information here about which row we're going to update in the database, it doesn't know it up here when we're actually trying to update the database. It doesn't have that information. So we're going to take this code and we're going to put it, we're going to control exit, and we're going to put it up here. And we specifically want it to be outside of this if not empty post thing, because we want this to know the options, and then we want this to know the options. So basically that needs to come up here so that everything on the page, in fact we really could do it even further up here, but this is fine. So we want our form processor to know that we've decided which row it needs to update. So there's a couple other things we need to look through. So the second thing we need to do is, normally on just a normal form where you're inserting, you can just use this process form. But because we're telling it which row of the database to update, what we need to do is we need to drop in this options array in here so that it knows, and you're saying process the form with these options. And then the next thing that we need to do, well, we'll start with there. So I'm going to save it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do Kim, let's see here. I think that should have an extra 8 on the end. I'm going to make sure. So let me put that in there, and then I guess I can't really put it in there. So let me come back here. Okay. So if I do Kim2 Hoover 2 and submit it, then if I come here to Hoover, Hoover doesn't come up for Kim. I have to go Hoover 2, and now we have Kim2 Hoover 2. So that's good. Now the question is, what happens if I look in the database, and I can see it here, I have somebody in the database with the RFID 5678. So if I were to come in here and try to change this to 5678, what would happen? So if I scan it, it says this student is not added, which is what we want. But the problem is that it doubled all the information in these forms. And the reason for that is because when you're doing one of these updates, there's two things that are kind of conflicting here. So this automatically goes to the database and tells it to get the information for that person, which is the first one going on here. The second thing it's doing is it says if there's post data, like it's basically doing its own if empty post, then put the information in here if the form fails. And so if you think about it, like let's say if we're adding a new student and we do Jim Hoover and we scan the RFID badge and the RFID badge is in use, we don't want it to wipe out the original Jim and the original Hoover. We want it to leave that there so we can correct the issue. But so basically we have two things telling it this is what should be in this field, and it's doing both. So there's a real simple solution to that. All we have to do here is to do $_post equals an empty array. And so we're going to tell it, if for some reason you have a conflict, forget what was ever posted and come back to an empty array. So let's come back here. Let's get out of this for a second. And we're going to search here. We're going to come back. And now, so we have this one. So let's make it fail again. 5, 6, 7, 8. And we scan. And now it's not going to duplicate it because it's going to say, it's going to give us back our original RFID and then the information that was in the database and not try to populate the form twice. So what we want to do is we want to come back here and change this to Kim, change this to Hoover, and now we should be able to update the page and, great. So we could, we could do a question mark over here and we could do updated like that. I mean, that's fine if we want to. I guess it'd be error equals, and we could just pass that message back over there. So if we were to do Hoover, and then we come here and we do Kimberly. Great. Now it says updated, and then we can go Hoover, and we'll see that we've updated Kimberly Hoover. So if there's a lesson in this, it is that there's usually a way to work your way around something. Now, it may not be the prettiest way, and I don't know that I have another piece of code where I had to do post equals an empty array like that to clear that out. But the fact is, no matter what the problem is, that's one of the great things about writing software is that you get the opportunity to do whatever you need to do. You can write whatever you want to write. And when you use somebody else's program, you're kind of stuck in the way that they did things. And to be honest, by using my form builder, you're stuck in the way I did things. And maybe you should just design the form yourself and do the hard work and actually make the form. And we're going to do that in some of the upcoming videos. But I guess the big thing is, when you have a problem, think through it logically and try to figure out if there's a way around it. And that's what will make you a good coder. That is what will make you a successful coder. So thanks for sticking with me, and we will see you in the next video.